Welcome to the Daybreak Star Radio Network. Our motto that we're very excited about is indigenizing the airways. That's why we exist. We're here to create voices for our artists that we play, that we're privileged and honored to play. And we would like to welcome John Hitchcock. Welcome to the Daybreak Star Radio Network.
Thank you, Harris. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So, John, can you tell everyone like where you are, your tribal affiliation, and what your role at the University of Wisconsin is?
Yeah, currently I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm originally from Medicine Park, Oklahoma, Lawton, Fort Sill area. My mother's side, I'm Kiowa and Comanche, and then on my father's side, be Northern European. And so I kind of consider myself an intercultural hybrid mixture, biracial person. Let's see my role. I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. I've been here since 2001, so about 22 years. And I teach primarily screen printing and relief cut printmaking, as well as I work with MFA graduate committees. And I also, in addition, I've served as Associate Dean of the Arts for the School of Education, where I work with theater, drama, and dance, and the art department. So I've done a lot of administration for a little bit of my time here. So,
yeah, that's pretty awesome. But honestly, you're a pretty well-rounded artist yourself.
Well, thank you. I'm a musician. That's true. I'm a musician as well, and so I've been playing in bands since I was probably 15 years old. And I've always played in bands since a kid and have continued. In the early days, I was playing in heavy metal, death metal bands, then punk bands, and then the grunge scene and all of that, which you know about where you're located. That's the history of the place and the importance of music. And like Hendrix was my favorite guitar player as a kid. Everybody inspires to be Jimi Hendrix. I'm left-handed, but I play the guitar right-handed. So yeah, so I've been a musician too, most from my youth on to now, still play.
John, in your own words, it's always awesome to get a directly from an artist. You're the star here currently at our wonderful cultural center here, and we've got your exhibit that I frequently stop by and check out here at Daybreak Star. And can you please tell our listeners about it and personally invite them to stop by?
Yeah, definitely. The name of the exhibition is The Things We Build. And all the works in the exhibition are works on paper. And it comes from a title from one of the pieces, The Things We Build. And it's screen printing, drawing, dye, and paint as well. So many of the artworks are a series that I was based on the reflections of Joy Harjo's book, The American Sunrise. So I spent many hours in my studio listening to Joy Harjo's book on a books on tape. And listening to that and thinking about some of the things that she's talking about in relationship to land and space and what that means. And so it was awesome because she was talking about Fort Sill, Oklahoma, commodities, all these things. And so a lot of the titles from the works were inspired by where I'm from, but also from listening to her poems and writing. So in particular, I'm from the Wichita Mountains, so that wildlife refuge and the notion of growing up around buffalo, deer, and elk, and you'd have this beautiful mountain range, and then in contrast, you'd have tanks and helicopters and military personnel that were practicing or preparing for battles at Fort Sill. So it was a strange, surreal experience of that, and so the work itself is wrapped up in thinking about that and those combinations of experiences and the notions of color and shape and dance regalia. So I grew up going to a lot of powwows with my grandparents in Oklahoma. And so they would have a summer powwow every year since I was from the 70s into the 80s, into the early mid 90s. And so going up to the Johnny and Peggy Reed's, that's their dance grounds in the summertime on Highway 49, and being there was just a big experience of my early childhood into adulthood. And so a lot of the visual information relates to that as well too.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. What influences your color choices in printmaking? Because they're so bright and clear.
Thank you. The colors come from so growing up on the tribal land, but going over to my grandparents, we lived in the same area. And so I would go up to my kaku, my grandmother, Comanche grandmother's house. And my taco, my grandfather, they were always working on things. Grandpa was working on drums and working on, they were singing. He was retired at the time. And so I would basically sit down with my grandmother and sit at her beading table, and she would have me tear off a little piece of paper, a brown bag, and then she'd ask me to draw on it. And so from drawing on it, listening to her, and she would basically ask me to go out and look outside and look at the flowers and look at the trees and the flowers and outside the house, particular roses. And she would want me to design drawings based on those actual drawings. And so she'd have me look at abstract shapes too. And so she was kind of I was looking at the flowers, I was looking at abstract shapes, but I was also looking at design. And so she was kind of having me draw from observational drawing outside to coming in, looking at abstract beadwork she's working on. Then she'd have me create a design. She'd say, okay, what I want you to do is think about all those colors you saw outside and the colors in this beadwork and the colors on the table. And I want you to create your own design. So she was having me use my imagination and thinking about relationship of shape and space and also objects itself. So she was giving me design skills, which I think is what I do as a professional in the arts, like in the arts community, but that's what I've learned from my grandparents. And so then I went to college for that, but it's interesting. So I had some early teachings from them. So she would also talk about the color. And so the color is about night and day color. And she'd say, look at what colors are there in the daytime and what yellows you see, what pinks, and how those colors go into each other. And then at night, when you're outside, as the sun's going down, what's the purples and the blues and the darks and how it gets darker, and look at the colors. So the colors of night and day were like really important, sort of the thinking behind a lot of this work that's in the show.
Well, no wonder you became an art professor, an art teacher. You were trained from a very young age.
Yes, definitely. So she was the one who inspired me to kind of, think about, what I'm doing and how I do it, and how I kind of think about drawing in particular.
Sean, if you could please tell us about how your art incorporates the intersectional history of the buffalo and American Indians, please.
Yeah, the buffalo. So I think the Plains tribes, to me, the buffalo were kind of like a walking supermarket. You think about it. So it for the Plains, it's like our contemporary Target or Walmart, like where we go to get things. And how do we look at the buffalo and how it was used? Everything, the meat for substance, and the hide for clothing, as well as shelter and in prayer. The bones also for tools, but also as for prayer as well. So we lived on their existence, the Plains people. And I think that buffalo itself, I'm trying to attempt to honor the buffalo by making artworks in relationship to the visuals, but also growing up in the Wichita Mountains where I would see buffaloes regularly. And so that was kind of an experience that I would, look at and see as a kid and growing up around it. But it's also commenting on the destruction of the buffalo as an attempt by the U.S. government as a controlling factor of controlling indigenous people by attempting to kill off the food and a source to destroy the people. So there's political concerns also in relationship to it. So I'm looking at the history of Americas to understand the complexity of all of the people who live here. And so understanding the land, acknowledging that, but also looking at the history of the land and our people. And the people, and acknowledging that this land is stolen, and the system of thinking and living in a forced situation, and then it's all about survival. So looking at the buffalo as a means of survival and how we've gotten to this place, and the buffalo have not disappeared. We have not disappeared. We're all moving forward, but that reality of the regrowth and rebirth and rethinking, and so how the buffalo kind of lives in that existence in some sense. And also I see the buffalo as self-portraits of us. And so they're portraits, and sometimes the drawings are reflective of our stance of people as survivors and surviving and moving forward. And so I want them to have a life to them that sort of references us as people.
Yeah, they certainly do. That's nice. I'm curious, so you said your grandfather was a drum maker. How did he influence your art or your music?
Yeah, so they would sit and sing songs all the time at the house, and they would sing hymnal songs and songs that like church songs that we grew up around, but also traditional songs that were passed down. He's Kiowa, so you'd hear these Kiowa songs that he would sing. But just like now, I think about this as being in a band, we rehearse, but it's so. He was part of an intertribal group, and they would come together, and he had a group of buddies that would come to their house, and they would sing. It's kind of a rehearsal, but they were just really getting into it because they knew the songs. But that whole idea of the message and how you get information and it's carried and passed down. And so sitting around as a kid, listening to them singing at the drum, and then driving them to powwows as I got older, I would go and tag along with my grandma and grandpa to the powwows. But it was exciting to be able to experience and witness him doing what he does at the house. But then you go to a dance, and then he's out in front of people and doing this at the drum. And so it never clicked until I got older. It's like, oh, this is like, it's performance in a way of music and doing your thing, but there's a power in that too. He also worked at Fort Sill, the military base. He worked on radiators for tanks and helicopters. And so this whole duality of, the military base, and then that reality of existence too. And so that was kind of a strange kind of experience too to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if some of that helped lean you towards metal and punk rock music, all the noises from the military base with the tradition in the background and such a juxtaposition. Maybe it pushed you that way a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so strangely, the noises in the background and all of that was, there's Dustin Tomokia, who's a well-known Comanche writer and thinker. He's thinking about the sound of war, the sound of that sound that's around us, and particularly in Oklahoma. I spent a lot of the summer down there this summer, and I just went back recently over winter. And every time we go, my partner Emily Arthur, she always comments like, "Do you hear that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And you hear this, and it's bombs, and it's submachine guns. And for those who live there, you're conditioned to think that, okay, this exists, and we have to exist in this. And you think historically how long our people have lived with that, and before that existed, like there was originally, Fort Sill was created as a post. It was a post originally to have trades and such, but then it turned into a military complex to capture St. Thide, Kiowa people, Quanah Parker of the Comanche, and Geronimo of the Cherokee people. And so that the descendants that are there now, are from the original people that lived in that area or moved through it. So that's where my head thinks about in relationship to those sounds, because the sounds of war, it exists to this day. I mean, there's training going on for wars that are happening right now.
If it's okay, we're going to switch, talk about your music now, your album, Bury the Hatchet, which Sharon and I have had a chance to definitely check out and listen. Came out in 2019. It's a beautiful, gorgeous album that really seems to bring to life parts of Oklahoma. And if you could please tell us, what this album means to you, from the artist, from your perspective, please.
So the album is, again, it's about passing on stories and traditions and beliefs and through an oral component. So, and I think Bury the Hatchet, it came from a meeting. I was in a dean's meeting, and someone said, well, we need to bury the hatchet. And I'm like, what did you say? Like, wait, what's this term? And like, I've heard it over and over. And I was thinking about how the idea of colonization puts in these forms of conversation and these spaces where people will just speak openly about things they have no idea of what its meaning is. And then on the other end, there is a history to the word. And so I looked into the word, and I'm looking at what that means. But then on the other end, I'm also looking at these tribal relations and situations that happen within communities. And I think in particular, there's songs about violence that had happened interculturally too, like Cutthroat Gap with the Kiowas and the Osage people, and so there's a story about that, and there's stories of my grandfather telling about the plains where he recorded the Tohin, this 101-year-old Comanche man that was in the hospital at the Indian hospital in Lawton, Oklahoma, and so he did these recordings of him, and this was at the early part of the I think 19, I can't remember the exact year, but it was way back. And so when these were recorded, he recorded on a reel-to-reel, and we took that recording and he gave it to me, and I took that recording and I turned it into a digital recording, and that's what's used on the speaking parts of him interpreting these stories from the 101-year-old Comanche man, Tohin. And so there's that retelling, and then there's also stories from my cousin Jason Cutnose, and I think he's talking about a lone wolf in the war with Texas, and he's talking about on one part of this about the various battles that had gone on throughout the different Kiowa leaders, war chiefs that had been in charge. But in this point, Lone Wolf was looking at he was looking at leadership by way of situation, by the people choosing him to be the leader. And in relationship to that, he was in Washington, D.C., where he was actually negotiating with the U.S. government about possession and place and land and movement and where they're going, where the Kiowa people are, and how they didn't want to be pushed to a reservation. He gets home and he finds out that his son had been killed and by Texas Rangers. And so he basically cut off his hair. He got rid of all of his horses, and kept his weapons, and then went to war with Texas. And in that process, he was against several people that Texans. And so that became another story that Jason was telling me. And so Jason's telling me these stories as we're driving around the Wichita Mountains, right where Cutthroat Gap happened, and where his family lives. My family only lives about 2 miles from his house. And so he's just telling these stories. And so through that process, when I recorded that, and I started to bring together my grandfather's stories and his stories. And so it's created this whole song narrative.
Yeah, I think that's I like the album a lot, but I think that song in particular, Lone Wolf in the War with Texas, is my favorite one from that. And the story is really intense, but then also your guitar playing in it is, I don't know, ethereal, but then it has some little harsh elements. It's very good. It really, being from Oklahoma, it helped me imagine like the weather and the hills and like the long time treks going through fields, and just it was really good. I like that one.
Yeah. So the thing about Oklahoma to me too is when I think of playing music is Fort Sill, because in the 80s, I played particularly to military personnel. So in 86, 87, 89, all of that, when the first Desert Storm happened and the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, all the early parts of that, I was playing to the military personnel going out. And so I was playing in bands that played songs by Slayer and Metallica and Iron Maiden and death metal bands too. And Creator was one of them. But if in that song, some of the rhythms have sort of heavy metal components, but they're not orchestrated the same way, and the use of distortion's not in it. But there's a band called Polvo, which it's I guess an independent band in the 90s, and they just have this weird tuning. So a printmaker I met, he showed me this tuning, and so I detuned and tuned it to this weird tuning that he showed me, which made that unique sound. So it had this really twangy kind of strange ominous sound to it because it was a very strange tuning. But I think though to me the notion of the recorded voice of Jason of Cutnose, and it's kind of challenging the Western perspective of the written word by reinforcing the indigenous viewpoints of oral history that are passed down from generation to generation through storytelling. So that storytelling and that passing of the information is crucial. And I think that that's what the album, it's a document of this moment. Like my grandfather having that reel to reel was another document that was passed to me. And he said, you'll know what to do with this someday. And that ended up turning into this project. And now I've been using pieces of that for different things. And then, thinking about where should this be, where should it should be held at some point, that particular reel to reel.
That's great. So we keep talking about the Wichita Mountains and the stories there. So how are they important to your own history and art making?
Location. Again, it's a pivotal part of my life. Going back there, it's homeland. Like I live here in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's Ho-Chunk territory. So I'm a visitor. I always feel I've been here 22 years, but I'm a visitor of this land. It's not where my family's from. It's not where, at least the family I grew up with and what I know in Oklahoma. So it's that place where I'm going back to, looking at that militarization and that beautiful land itself, and how the strangeness of those two spaces and the beauty of all of my relatives who lived there and my cousins and people I can see, and going back there and thinking about like what's the importance of community and how it's had an impression on me and on anyone. We're all from a place, and so what does that say to us and how does it speak to us? So to me, honoring that notion of that, and also looking at the complexity of the space. If you think about like veterans and the service to community and how Indigenous people are very much, it's a very big part of our thinking, but the duality of colonization of space and how do we learn to coexist with settler culture and colonized space in the reality of war and survival. So when you're back home, for me, I'm listening to people tell stories about their existence from generations, being maybe descendant from a code talkers or being descendant from St. Daide, the Kiowa chief. There's still these stories that are passed down all the way, to from way back to now in the current generation. And so looking at that and how we learn from it. We learn from those songs too.
What advice, this is one of our favorite questions to ask, John, because, we have so many youth and becoming artists that are just trying to get their foot in the door here. What advice would you give from someone, as a real true professional like yourself that's accomplished so much throughout your tenure, to an up and coming native artist that, maybe has never stepped into a recording studio or, never written out some lines?
That's a hard question, and it's one that I think about daily, because as I walk into a classroom, I'm trying to think, how do you inspire people, and then how do you get the ability to have value in what you do and what you make. And I think staying curious is one of the biggest things, is for any of us, is we stay curious and let go of fear and think about what's around us, what we can't control and what we can control, and how do we look towards being curious about something, but also being adaptable in some ways. So I always say, be like water. I remember Truman Lowe, who's a very well-respected professor who's passed away, and he taught here, and he said, you have to think like water here. He said, you got to be moving all the time, because water moves and you've got to get it. When you're in the water, you're going to move with it. So when he said that, I was like, that's awesome. Like thinking like you're being like water and having economy too, and having the ability to do things efficiently, but also succinct. And I think the biggest one too is value. Like, how do you value yourself? your work, your time, and respect others, and know that you have value. I think we as people have value, and what our value is, and look to the value that we have and what we have to offer, but also value what we don't need to offer, because that's the value that keeps us moving, and that's what really keeps us alive. And then look to mentors and people around you that can help you in your life and help you move forward. And I think that's some of the I have a whole list of things, but those are the ones that I think of instantly is value and staying curious and have an economy to move, to do things, and also value where you're at, because where you're at is incredibly important. No matter what land you're at and on, there are resources from your elders and people around you that are very important, and you don't even realize what they are. And sometimes until you get older, you're like, oh, they were teaching me a lesson. And going back home and being home or staying home, there's no need to move away always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like that water analogy too. That's good.
That's Truman Lowe's one that he gave me, and I'm like, oh, I like that. That's
knowledge to pass on. That's great. So what is next for you? What are you working on now? It's more art, more music.
I have a show currently at the Grunwald Gallery, which is in Indiana University. And that is up. And so we're doing an album actually called Blanket Songs for that show.
Oh,
and so the show opened, and we actually performed the album. And the show opened this past weekend. And so we just recorded the album, and we're going to try to release it. It's hopefully going to be released coming up in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky, but we're going to do a release here too. It'll happen in May. So we're excited. It's going to have ghost stories in it.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a new one, like to mix in the ghost stories. And let's see, Marla Nonai, who's a well-respected, well-known Comanche singer and actress. She's performing on it too. So that's really exciting.
Wow. So is it similar to Bury the Hatchet, that you're taking stories from others and putting them with music, or is it?
So this time, yeah, kind of. So what I'm doing is I'm reinterpreting the stories that Grandma told me, and they're about little people, nunapis.
Yeah.
Little people, and Comanches call them nunapis. And so there's also the deer woman. There's a story about the deer woman, and many cultures have these stories. And so it's particularly in Oklahoma. And I think if you watch Reservation Dogs, people are being, introduced to this through through that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's one of my favorite Native authors does horror fiction as well. His name's Stephen Graham Jones. If you've not heard of him, he does great interweaving of some of the stories with his novels. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Have you seen Prey?
Oh, yes.
Marla Nonai is doing some of the voice on Prey.
Okay.
The Comanche, because the Comanche components are on there in the language. But
yeah, it was fascinating to watch in Comanche. It was added so much to it.
Yeah, it's dedicated to Juanita Pataponi, who's my aunt, who's passed on. But at the end, they mentioned she was one of the first advisors with the Comanche language with them. But she was my art teacher too when I was in high school. So it's amazing to see Comanches in this, the arena, like that arena. And so it's exciting to see that happening. And yeah, also I'm in a show with Tom Jones as well, who's a colleague here, and Emily Arthur. We're both going to be at the show at the Smithsonian National Gallery. That's curated by John Smith. So that's happening coming up.
Well, congratulations. That's the big time.
Yeah, we're excited. Like it is. It's like, yay!
Good job. Yeah.
I think every show is the big time to me. And I'm like, a show's a show. Like I'm excited, but that show's like Madison Square Garden of the arts.
Right.
Oh yeah.
That's fabulous. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so lovely talking and getting to know you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And so looking forward to hopefully coming your way and yeah.
We'll have to do something live on the air when you come here and get some video of it in here too.
That's cool. That'd be awesome. Are y'all going to play music on this as well, or is it going to be
A little bit. We'll roll some in there.
okay? Cool.
The editing team works their magic. Takes about 2 weeks to get it all whipped up, and then it'll be on our blog, and I'll send it to you once it's all completed, and then it'll be on social media, and then we'll be talking about it on the air too. So it takes about 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. So if I come, it'd be nice to play some slide guitar or something because I can bring one or be easy to do
Awesome.
work with.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Maybe we could work something out with Jose and do that a little bit during your opening.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, maybe we could work something
Oh,
out.
we could get a stanger from there and do something together too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm
That
all
might
about
be
collaboration.
possible. Well, actually, lots of things are possible. So yeah, we could probably work something out.
Keep in touch,
Awesome.
please keep in touch with us, and you've got my number. And
Thank you so much. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
He told people in D.C., don't hold me to any promises, and don't hold my people to any promises, because we're not going to live in one